So, episode 5. So, I know I say I don't like to start with a rant, and this is going to make it 2 of the 5 episodes have begun with a rant. But this one really annoyed me. And honestly, I would say 40% isn't actually too bad of a rant ratio, considering how much nonsense goes on when it comes to football discourse. And so, for context, I'm sure every single one of you who is watching this already is aware that Cristiano Ronaldo started a YouTube channel. I think it was either last week or the week before. And he put up a video the other day, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, of him with Rio Ferdinand. And he made a comment which was, I want to score 1,000 goals and have all of them be on video. And it was a joke. And everyone lost their mind. I say everyone. People who don't like Ronaldo, which happens to be a large percentage of the populace, lost their mind. They were seething and they were foaming at the mouth. Brazilian subsets of people, nostalgia people, people who hate Ronaldo for no good reason, Messi fans saying, oh, this is clear evidence that he's selfish and he's arrogant, he's this and that. And they took another clip out of context, which was him saying he was crying as he let down. Like, yes, crying on international television is embarrassing, but you know, it's whatever really, like it happened. But the one where people abused him because he made a joke saying that he wants all his goals to be on video, which they are, by the way. Every single one of his will be on video, unlike guys who played in the 50s, like Pele and Di Stefano and all these other guys. But people decide to make a big hullabaloo over it for no reason other than the simple fact they don't like Cristiano Ronaldo. For one reason or another. Either he scored a bunch of goals on your favourite team, he's won a bunch of trophies, he's scored more goals than your favourite player, he's won more trophies than your favourite player, he's got more Ballon d'Ors, whatever it happens to be. Because I refuse to believe it's just, oh, I don't like the way he's talked about. Because then you have an issue with his fans as opposed to him, the player, the person, right? And if you hate him for certain allegations, right, that is also fair. I'm not going to comment on what I think of those particular allegations just because it's not particularly relevant to this piece of discourse. But, Jesus Christ, like, if you just hate the guy, admit it and say it. Don't hide behind a bunch of agendas where you say, oh no, I actually quite like him. I don't have a problem with him. It's his fans or it's his game. It's this. No, you don't like the guy. Fair enough. Just admit it and own it, right? You seem much more true to yourself and act with much more integrity if you just admitted that you don't like the guy. For whatever reason, you can hate him because he has black hair. I don't know. You can hate him because, I don't know, he's 6'2". Right, you can hate him because he played for Real Madrid. You can hate him because, I don't know, he's had plastic surgery done to his face and he looks very different when he was 18. I don't know. Whatever it is that you want to say, whatever it is that you want to choose to hate about him, that's your prerogative. But don't use a joke to make your point, which was clearly a joke. He was laughing and chuckling about it. He had a grin on his face. He knew he was taking the mick, and all of you idiots make a huge deal over it. It's just sad. Right, go get a life, go outside, please, make some friends. You know, like, instead of just crashing out on Twitter because you're upset at a joke he made at the expense of a guy who was a pensioner when you were born. Grow up, please. Jesus Christ. Okay, I think that was only 3 minutes, which isn't too bad. So, today, onto the actual topic of the episode. What I want to talk about today is, it's sort of a 2-part thing which overlay into one. So I want to talk about the homogenization of the Premier League. And when I say the homogenization, I mean trying to make everything the same, right? So homogenization, I don't know, some of you may have heard of it in the context of milk when you were studying germ theory in school. I don't know. I looked at that. I'm not sure if you did. It wasn't a very interesting lesson, but so homogenization and pasteurization, they go together in the process of milk so we can actually drink it. And in this topic, it's where you make everything the same. For example, in tennis, they've made Wimbledon, the court, more similar to how hard courts are. For example, I just read that a few weeks ago when, I think this was when the Olympics were going on, and everyone hates Djokovic for similar reasons that they hate Ronaldo. And then we look at basketball, for example, where almost everyone plays, especially like a few years, it's less prominent now due to the impact of size, but everyone was playing the same brand of basketball. It was all, pretty much everyone was just taking the emphasis of, right, 5 out, run into the paint and kick it out for a bunch of 3-pointers and take a 3-pointers early in the shot clock, right? Everyone was playing the exact same way. And there's a similar phenomenon going on in the Premier League right now. I'm not going to say football as a whole, because let's say the Spanish League, for example, they will play low blocks from hell every single game against top teams. They won't try this play out from the back nonsense, right? Unless the team just refuses to press and they just give up the ball. And, in German leagues, they play a similar style to England, but Italians, on the whole, they don't play the same. Maybe that's because Pep hasn't been there yet. I don't know. I couldn't actually explain it. I don't watch enough Italian football. I just watch the odd game here or there for particular players, like, say, when Osimhen went to Napoli for the first time, when I first went to Kvaratskhelia. I still watch Milan every now and then because I like Leao, things like that. And then the French league, they also play low blocks from hell. Like, they're not very fun. That's the most physical league of the top 5 leagues. But so it's not a phenomenon which is happening everywhere, but I particularly want to speak about what's happening in England and how everyone is trying to play a similar dynamic, which is higher lines with ball-playing centre-backs, and you play possession-based football. Now, personally, that's fine. Everyone wants to copy Pep. But if you want to do that, that's your prerogative, but I don't particularly enjoy it. Now, also, the other thing is, I'm going to preface this with the way that Pep plays football is actually probably the most conducive to myself as a person. Because watching City, if I am rooting for City for whatever reason, whether it be for financial purposes, whether it be because they're playing a team which I don't particularly like, they give me the least amount of anxiety. I never feel worried when I'm watching City. And it's not because they win almost every game. It's because of the way they play. For example, Liverpool, if I'm rooting for them in a game, again, for any particular reason, whether it's because they're playing a team which I don't particularly like, or whether it's because there's financial gain for me here, they gave me anxiety when I watched them because of the amount of space which they leave behind and the amount of transitions they see. They had Van Dijk, so it didn't matter. But they gave me anxiety when I root for them. City don't. So the most smooth viewing experience as a whole is Manchester City. I don't really see an argument against that. But nonetheless, it still is. It's not something which I enjoy to watch on a day-to-day basis, right? I don't sit down and think, I want to watch Man City. No, I will watch them if there is certain benefits for me at the end of it. I don't like to promote those things. That's a different topic. So it happens both in discourse and in team models and how they play. For example, like if we look at guys on Twitter, they always talk about how, we need a lighthouse 6. We need to we need to invert the fullback and turn it into a back 3 and have the other fullback go into midfield and make a 3-2-2-3 or whatever it is, right? And it just creates this environment where every single team plays the same way. And that only ends one way, which is the standard bearing team will win because they're the team which did it first and they're the team which makes the most, and they're the team which makes the quickest adjustments because they know the flaws of their game model, which is something I'll go into later in a bit more detail. And the other interesting thing is that if we look at the past 2 seasons, if we look at the top 4, City and Arsenal both made it each in the last 2 seasons. In 22-23, United made it. I think they finished 3rd. And Newcastle made it. United and Newcastle don't exactly play a possession-based style. United claim they want it, but they don't. Newcastle make no bones about it. They're going to play direct, fast football. And they don't exactly play... And they are they're about middle of the pack possession-wise, Newcastle. Newcastle was 7th in possession. And the gap between... So United was 6th. And the gap between them and 5th, I can't remember who was 5th, was about 5 percentage points, which was bigger than the gap between, I think, 7 and 10. So 5 and 7, or 7 and 10, 7 and 11, something like that. I don't remember exactly. So Newcastle had that. And if we just look at last season, 22-23, so Villa had 53% possession on a game-to-game basis. Arsenal had 58. Villa play a high line, but theirs is to trap the opposition team in offside, not to sustain pressure. And they don't often play out, and they're not obsessed with this vision of playing out from the back. They're a very pragmatic team, which is based on beating you and are quite direct going the other way, and they're based on Mavericks going forward. And it's interesting because the gap between 6th and 7th in terms of possession use last year, Arsenal with 58 and Villa with 53, was bigger than the gap between 7 to 11. I can't remember who was 11th, But they had, I think, something like 48%. 48 point something, maybe like 48.9, I think it was. If I got that right, I'll be impressed with myself. And then I think 12 had something like 47. So that obviously breaks the trend. But the point is that a team which finished 7th, which could have very easily finished 10th or 11th in possession, finished above teams such as Brighton, such as Chelsea, such as Spurs, who were all top 5 possession teams. And those teams didn't play well down the stretch of the season. Spurs finished what, 7th, 8th? I don't remember exactly. Who was the top 6? No, United finished 8th. Newcastle finished 7th. Spurs finished 6th, I want to say. I might be wrong on that. No, Chelsea finished, I think Spurs finished 5th. So Spurs finished 5th. Brighton finished like 10th or something. They finished 10th, 12th, I don't remember exactly. They weren't very good. And Chelsea finished 6th. And even that was only because they sort of abandoned the model which was coming from the top down. They merged into a more heliocentric style around Cole Palmer, and they ultimately won a bunch more games towards the end of the season. They finished 6th. Then they sacked Poch, which I thought was frankly stupid, but that's a whole different thing. So what we have there is 2 seasons of evidence with, okay, are those teams built to win titles in Newcastle and Villa? No, they frankly need a lot more quality. But are Spurs, Chelsea, and Brighton set up to win a title? No, Brighton are on 7 points to open the season. They will fade. I don't think I need to explain that. Spurs finished 5th, and they won 1, drew 1, and they're yet to play. This will go up after today's Premier League games. Like at the time of recording, it is 11:10:48. I think it is. I think that's right. So that is what we're basing it off right now. And Chelsea, they've won 1, lost 1. Now they lost to City 2-0, and they won a game last week which was 6-2. But that could easily be flipped, right? And frankly, they could have done a number on City, and they also could have lost to Wolves. So it's a bit of a different dynamic. But are those teams particularly built to win titles? No. Were they built to win a title last season? No. Newcastle and Villa weren't either, but they played a pragmatic style of football across the last 2. Newcastle had a poor season last year, but that wasn't because of their style of football. It was because they had injuries galore. They had a very thin squad, and it wasn't built to withstand the rigours of the Champions League and in European football in general, which is why when they finished 4th, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing for them. And plus they have home advantages, they're a very good home team, etc. So what we get from there is that teams who don't win trophies, it surely benefits them to play a more direct, pragmatic style of football, even if it's not the prettiest. Because as long as you have enough talent up front, you can make it pretty enough. For example, West Ham, they're never under Moyes. I've not watched them yet this season because I didn't watch their City game. I didn't watch the game against City live yesterday. But they play a style with Kudus and Paqueta, and they are ball players, which makes it entertaining enough, which means that, okay, I'm going to get a maverick moment of quality here. Crystal Palace, they hardly played. This season aside, they've lost all 3 games, but normally they're always reliable for a moment of magic or 2 because they have certain ballers. You know, they had Zaha, they had Townsend, they had Balassi. Now coming into here, they had Elise, they've still got Eze, now they've got Nketiah. You know, they've got certain guys who always bring you out of your seat for various reasons. Even Jason Puncheon was worth a moment of magic every now and then, for Christ's sake. And then they had that chap who scored that banger, the volley. I don't remember his name. Oh no, that was against them. I think it was Kasami for Fulham. Christ, that was what, 11 years ago now? 10, 11. Christ. But yeah, the point remains is that you can win in multiple different ways. It doesn't have to be this same model which City and Arsenal promote. And that doesn't, and like, even when it comes to certain levels of discourse, it just irritates me because it acts as if there's only one way to play football when there's really not. It just happens that that's the prevalent way to play football right now because of Pep. And he's won everything. But a lot of that comes due to, he's the best tactician in the world, there's no doubt about that. But a lot of that does come down to the fact that he has had borderline unlimited funds. He can fix his mistakes when he makes them. Claudio Bravo, big mistake, brings in Edison. Okay, there we go. Matheus Nunes signs him. Okay, he doesn't work. And all of a sudden they're thinking about spending 80 million for Bruno Guimaraes 1 season later. Kovacic comes in and he works out, etc. He has had a series of guys which haven't necessarily worked. He was allowed to fix those errors. Now, that's not a knock on him. He's by far the best coach in the world. But nonetheless, he has had conditions which are better than probably any other coach in the world. because there was no way that City were ever sacking him, so there was never any pressure on him to lose his job. So, what can you do? So, the next thing I want to move on to is, obviously it does come from Pep, and you want to do what he does. But the problem here is, the models which Pep implements, you implement them 6 to 12 months later, at earliest. 6 months at very earliest. 12 months later is more realistic. The problem is that you implement Pep's model from 12 months ago. He's already seen the model. He's seen the flaws in the model, and he's adapted and he's moved on to something else. It's like I'm going to reference other sports here simply because of the fact that other sports are further ahead in this analytics drive than footballers. But let's take basketball, for example. Let's take Golden State. For those of you familiar with Golden State, I'm sure you all are, because if you're watching this, you're probably a sports junkie, which means you probably also watch basketball on a regular basis. Even if you don't watch it, even if you're not a junkie on it, like might be a bigger nerd about basketball history, particularly than I am with football. So when it comes to, let's say Golden State, they shoot a ton of threes, right? They started the 3-point boom. They have a fair argument to say that, right? Miami had it, the Suns before them, but Golden State were really the first team to go 3-point boom because they had 5 guys all under 6'8", 6'8" and under. Let's go, because I think Iguodala was 6'7" actually as well, and they had Harrison Barnes, who I think is 6'8". He's not high. He's not taller than 6'9". Let's go. Let's just leave it at that. So they had 5 guys who were all under 6'8", who were all 6'8" and under, who can all shoot a bunch of threes. Then you take the Houston Rockets, who they really took this model on 2 years after Golden State, when they brought in Mike D'Antoni, who was the coach for the Suns, who sort of started this 7 seconds or less than. This will come back to football, I promise you. And they think, okay, right, we got James Harden now, he's a good passer, we're going to shoot a bunch of threes now. So they eliminated the mid-range. So, borderline, right? James Harden will still take the odd one here or there with about 10, 12 foot little push shots. But for the most part, they just shot threes. So they tried to take the model which Golden State had and take it one step further. The problem was that Golden State saw the flaws with not shooting any threes, and they adapted it. No, with not shooting any mid-range shots, and they adapted and brought in the mid-range. So ultimately, and then they brought in Kevin Durant, which just amplified that even further. Because now you have a guy who is a top 2-3 mid-range shooter in the history of the sport. So they've identified the flaws within their model. They've addressed the flaws in their model, and you're only taking on their model now. So now you're a step behind them. So it's impossible for you to beat that team at their game, particularly in an advanced multiple game set out, which is ultimately what basketball is, because to win the title, you need to win 4 of 7. So the best team almost always wins. It's rare that they do. No, it's rare that they don't. It still happens where they don't, but regardless, it's still, the vast majority of the time, the best team will win. If it goes to 7, then the teams are fairly even, then the best team can lose. For example, 2016 Golden State. I think that LeBron James made the Cavs better than the Warriors, but on the whole, the Warriors were the better side. It's a complicated dynamic. But so they addressed the flaws in their model before the other team even implemented that very model. Okay, it was different because Houston were heliocentric. Think Lionel Messi, think Neymar. And Golden State were more egalitarian, where it was more, okay, motion, runs, things will happen within the flow of the attack, flow of the offense. Think 2022 Manchester City, almost like 2018 through to 22, up to the point where they got Harden. In that pattern, essentially. So they addressed the flaws in their model, whereas Houston only implemented it. That's a very similar thing, which what a lot of these teams are doing, to link it back to football now that I've gone on that 3-minute ramble. Teams want to play the Pep way, the inverted fullbacks, bringing things in. We're going to work it, so we're going to play high lines, possession-based, and we're going to choke the opposition out. The problem is that you try and adapt the model which Pep has had, and he got it humming. He's seen the flaws in the model, and he would have seen it mid-season. He just didn't want to spend it in mid-season and spend a bunch of money mid-season. So he waits till the summer because he knows that City are good enough and they are likely going to win the league anyway because the rest of the challenges are inadequate. And now he addresses the flaws in his model. So you're implementing something which is old, and he has now gone advanced beyond that. So now you're still a step or 2 or 3 behind him, which is why it's impossible. And it lays into the fact that there have been 4 coaches who have finished above Guardiola in league history. Since 2008-9, so 2009 his first league season, up to 2024, that's 15 years, minus the year he took a sabbatical between Barcelona and Bayern Munich. What the hell they did to him in Barcelona that made him take a year off, and now he's coach for, this is going to be year 13 in a row, and he's probably going to stretch out to 14, 15. What they did to him, I don't know. But he took a year out, irrespective, to assess his options. Maybe just because there wasn't a favourable situation on the table for him, so he decided to take a year out. Whatever. Let's ignore it. This isn't a conversation about Barcelona's backroom staff. There are plenty more people who are much more knowledgeable than me about Barcelona's situation that you can go and listen to. So, the only coaches to finish above him, Jose Mourinho in 2011-12, 2016-17, Antonio Conte, and Mauricio Pochettino. City finished 3rd that season. He wins every other league title because obviously 9, 10, 11, he wins every single one. 13 year out. 14, 15, 16, all 3 years in Germany, wins at a canter. 17, Conte, Pochettino, doesn't win. 18, 19 wins. 20, Klopp. 21, 22, 23, 24. 4 in a row, that's miserable. He's turning the league into the Bundesliga. So the only coaches who have actually beat him are teams which don't follow his game models. Jose Mourinho is one of the most direct, pragmatic coaches that you will ever see, particularly when he was still in touch with the modern professional, right? When he could still get Khedira and Alonso and Ozil and Ronaldo and Benzema and Higuain and Ramos, and he wasn't fighting with guys, and he wasn't being an arsehole to legends of the club and things like that. Mourinho was one of the most pragmatic, direct coaches that you will see, which is ultimately why Real Madrid played, in my view, potentially the most entertaining football this century. Arguably ever, because I just personally enjoy that style of football more than I do the Guardiola's model. So he beat him through not doing what Pep did. Because again, he didn't try and copy the model, right? He didn't get the inferior model. He took his own model, he adapted it to this Real Madrid team, and by year 2 he won the title. Then let's look at 2017. Conte and Pochettino. So Conte was also his first season in the league. He did not take on the Pep model. He took a system which the Premier League had never seen before, 3-4-3. And what did he do? He won the league at a counter. No one could deal with them because the wing backs would push up and almost make a front 5. The midfield, almost make a front 5. You had the midfield pivot with Kante and Matic, who were as steady and as stiff as you will ever come across. Then you have the back 3 behind them. So ultimately, the wing back would get up and down. Alonso, Moses, those are guys who don't particularly want to deal with. And that won the league. He wasn't trying to out-Pep. Pochettino, again, he's a direct, progressive coach. He's not someone who's obsessed with position. He's a counter-press. He's more in the model of Klopp than he is Pep. Which is very, very good, because ultimately it allowed him to amass a large amount of points. If he tried to implement what Pep did, they would have finished worse. Because A, it doesn't fit the profiles of what he had in that Tottenham team. B, the model would just be inferior. So, what are you going to do? And then you get Klopp. And Klopp is Pep's best competitor. I don't think domestically there's an argument over this. So 2011, Real Madrid did very well under Mourinho. 2012, they won. So 1-1. Knockout formats, obviously, Jose did a number on Pep. 2010, on the way to the treble. 2011, they won the Copa del Rey over Pep's Barcelona with Ronaldo as striker. They didn't match up in 2009. Because United had bounced Inter in the round of 16. So that's not the greatest example. And then they didn't match up again until, in the knockout format, I don't think it was until 16-17 in the League Cup, and United won. And then, obviously, domestically, Pep finished above Mourinho in both of the 2 seasons they were in England. So now you get Klopp. And obviously, he finished above Klopp more often than not. 16-17, 17-18, 18-19. 2021, 2022, and 2023, and 2024. Every single season. But the point isn't the record here. Because Mourinho's record on paper is probably more impressive, right? 1-3 is more impressive than 1-6 or 7 or 8 or whatever it is. I don't remember. I don't know the exact number. But in terms of the way he pushed Pep, in terms of individual games, and in terms of the way which he pushed Pep to the title, and he didn't really suffer a fall-off outside of 22-23 when he refused to recruit the midfield, I believe that he is his finest competitor. As well as the duration of the rivalry, which probably has something to do with it as well. The Mourinho and Pep genuinely hated each other. I think Mourinho and Klopp, I think Pep and Klopp actually quite like each other. So what did he do? Again, it was similar, not the same, but it was a similar approach to what Mourinho and Klopp and Conte. It was direct. It was counter-pressing. It was a line by which they weren't relying on possession-based high lines and ball-playing centre-backs. They did, but in their own way. Because a lot of the time, Pep will play through the midfield directly. A lot of the time, Van Dijk would just slap a ball over the top to Mane, slap a ball over the top to Salah and get them up the pitch that way, and then the counter-pressers win the second ball and things like that. If they were going through the middle, it would a lot of the time be a dribbler through Joel Matip or a zing through where he'd almost bypass Fabinho to a certain degree, and he'd zing it straight through to, say, a Henderson or a Wijnaldum, usually Wijnaldum, or they give it to Trent. They played a very direct style of football, and they won the league with it. And they got 97 and then 99 points with it. So again, you're not going to out-Pep, right? That's what that shows. Which brings me into Mikel Arteta and Chelsea and Brighton. These are three clubs which seem to have a particular emphasis on wanting to play a particular way. Which is, and with Chelsea we know this for a fact, because this was involved in their coaching set, which is why they sacked off Pochettino. Ball-playing possession coach, who can also give you sturdy defensive capabilities, quote unquote, which Leicester won last season, I believe. I have a friend who's a Leicester fan. I don't think he didn't seem annoyed when Maresca left. He thought he was fine, but he wasn't particularly annoyed. So, and a guy who coaches with young players, because ultimately younger players are more susceptible to dealing with drilled, essentially stripping of the individuality, which is essentially what Arteta has done. Chelsea and Arsenal have done this in particularly. Both have gone with City assistants. Maresca was with him, I think, in 2022-23, and Arteta was with him, obviously, until he joined Arsenal. So, and what they did was, we'll ignore the Chelsea example for now, because of the fact it was still very early. Maresca's only had, 4 full games? 2 in the Conference League, 2 in the Premier League. So I think it's a bit harsh to use that example immediately, but with Arsenal, people can say that the advanced analytics or the league's officials and this and this and this, and last season's underlying metrics had Arsenal as the best team in the league. Okay, fine. Guess what? They still didn't win. Why? Because Arteta was still stuck with the model that he had in 22-23. He just slightly improved on it with slightly better players. Meanwhile, Pep looked at the model he had in 22-23 and he improved it. He missed De Bruyne for half the season. They didn't miss him whatsoever. Because every single time when it seems they're more dependent on De Bruyne ends up missing time. And they still stay competitive. And then De Bruyne comes back at the end of the season and then bang. Like, what are you going to do? So, if you are going to... So, all of those teams which I mentioned, so Chelsea, Arsenal, if we stick to Arsenal have improved year on year since Arteta came in, right? Well, since 2021, right? Since his first full season, right? Scratch off 19-20. 2021, they weren't great. 21-22, they were in a serious top 4 race, right? They really should have made it, and then they went to bed at the end. 22-23, they were a title contender. Not really, but they were. I never viewed them as a serious threat to City. 23-24, I never viewed them as a serious threat to City. I always thought it was going to be Liverpool who'd pip City to the title if it wasn't going to be them. Why? A, because of the fact that their model is just inferior to City's. B, they don't have as good a players as City, so it just doesn't translate to them winning the league. Because City have the 2 best players in that rivalry. De Bruyne and Haaland. De Bruyne, say what you want, and he looks physically washed. You give me De Bruyne for a game, or you give me Bukayo Saka for a game, or you give me Martin Odegaard for a game, I'm taking De Bruyne. And I'm not hesitating too much. Because at the end of the day, De Bruyne is still going to slap a ball in from 30 yards, and he's still one of the best crosses of the football, and he's still one of the best final balls in the world. And he can still move not very well, but well enough to still be a threat in semi-transition. Not full-on transitions like it was back in the day, but semi-transitions. So, where they have a real threat, I don't know. And based off early works this season, I don't think Arsenal have a chance this season either, just because I thought to really compete with City, they needed to get a superstar forward in, a game breaker, which again I'll touch on a little later when I dip my toe into the topic of efficiency models and analytics and things like that. So that's that, and then if I change it into general, so that's that when it comes to Arsenal in terms of why on the whole, that's a bit of a ramble. I'm pouring drinks at the same time, but so ultimately the point here is I don't believe that you can out Pep, which is ultimately what Arsenal are trying to do, and I don't believe it's possible. So that's where the homogenisation comes in, because again, it just shows, in my view, when you try and copy something which has already worked and they see the flaws and advances and they can address those flaws, because you think that City are just sitting there and being like, oh well, we're winning. We don't need to address our flaws like certain idiotic clubs do. They're not just sat there sitting on the laurels. They're like, okay, where can we improve? There's a reason that everything, like say last season, they lacked a bit of a wing threat. So who did they sign? They signed Savio. I don't particularly think he's a superstar, but he's good enough to be a threat in an isolated City system. I watched him a bit at Girona last season, particularly around the winter time when Girona actually seemed like a threat to the league title. And then say we look at, and then who else did they sign? I forget. Did they bring in anyone else? The rumours were that we're looking at Bruno. Why? To bring an extra element of passing and progression to their team, which they could put alongside Rodri, someone who doesn't vacate spaces like Kovacic does. So again, that's another piece. Whereas Arsenal, they've essentially brought the same team in as our season. They didn't push for a guy in the form of Leo. They didn't push for a top end forward, which really would have taken them to the next step. Instead, they just signed another defender when their defense was one of the most stout in the league last season. So yeah, it's what it is. So the next thing I want to dip into is the way that people talk about it. And even the way that people view the game is becoming homogenized in terms of they only view the game in one simple way. For example, all these tactico accounts who are viewed as voices of authority in the space of football on Twitter and Instagram and things like that. Let's say Instagram's a mess, but let's just say YouTube and Instagram. They're always stressing on the fact that you need to have a centre back, a full-back who can tuck inside and play as part of a back three, and a full-back who can invert into midfield, as well as having a lighthouse six, right? In the form of, say, an Onana, a Rodri, a Rice, things like that, a Tchouaméni, guys like that. When ultimately those guys have flaws because, like say, Tchouaméni, he's not got a super passing range. Rice is afraid to play forward passes, and when he does play them forward, he gets way too much air underneath them. Especially when he's playing crossfield passes, switches take too long to get to the guy, and it allows teams to shift over while the pass is in the air. Rodri is obviously an exception. Fabinho obviously was fantastic at it. He had a fantastic passer range, things like that. Onana is great because he's fantastic on the ball and he doesn't mess around. He's great in both boxes and he's supremely mobile. We'll see where he goes. I don't think he stays at Villa for more than 2 years. So, yeah. But you don't need to play the same way. And again, it goes back to if you try and stick to the same model that everyone else is trying, you're just going to be worse because you got there later than everyone else. It's like, I have a weird tendency of drifting off into other things. I remember one time I compared Thomas Muller to Bitcoin. No, to a altcoin. And yeah, I compared Thomas Muller to an altcoin. Like, you look at an altcoin and you can see, and you can probably get a general idea as to where Bitcoin's going, right? If Bayern are doing well, then if Bitcoin's doing well, the altcoin does well, similar to Thomas Muller, right? Whereas, but you're still beholden to that. You're still beholden to Bitcoin. Bitcoin in this scenario is Pep, right? And if I'm wrong on that, which I don't think I am, I think I'm in the right ballpark, but we'll go with him. So when you have Pep and he's Bitcoin and you're just an altcoin, like you're Solana or ETH or something like that, but you're beholden to that. And when you're beholden to it, you're always stuck and you're not actually going in your own line of progression. You just have to hope they have an off year. And you need to win every single one of your games to actually build it up to the point where it's like, okay, this season's a throwaway. Like City in 2020 when Liverpool were winning every single game. So when people talk about like that, again, it's like you can have your view on the game But if it's only fitting one model, then it doesn't actually work, because over a long enough time frame, you are going to get stuffed by the team with the superior model because of the fact they've fixed those same issues. And I keep talking about the model because of the fact that that's what these are. Style of playing, philosophies, and they're just game models, really. So I used model because I'm going to dip into analytics, which is very heavily emphasized on models. So whilst Liverpool do need a 6, do they necessarily need one who is in the form of a Rice, a Rodri, a Shermaine? No, they don't. If they just have a mobile ball winner, or even just a guy who can win duels and he can help initiate attacks, especially because of the fact that they are playing more of a double pivot this season, a flat out 4-2-3-1, you have guys who can cover the space. As long as the guys are good in duels, you're okay. So you can play with overlapping fullbacks, and you can play with guys who get up the pitch, and you don't need to have the fullback turn it into a back three and things like that. In general, I think it's just lazy analysis because you try and seem smart. Because if you copy Pep, then you seem smart, especially whether it be in the realm of football discourse or whether it be in a coaching method. Right? Everyone is still trying to say how Maresca is a genius, even though there's no actual evidence for it. It's stupid, really, isn't it? And also, I think it also comes down to the fact that you get praised for playing a certain way. For example, look at Company. He played progressive football with Burnley, and they finished 19th or whatever it is, and they didn't have a chance of survival. And he got a job at Bayern Munich. The chap who who managed Norwich for a few years, Farker, I think it was. He played progressive football, and he's always getting top tier championship jobs. He got some job and he got a job in Germany as well. Like, I think David Wagner had a decent job as well, and he was at Huddersfield. What the hell did I say married? So all these guys, it gets praised. Meanwhile, Sam Allardyce, Sean Dyche, all these guys who are pragmatists. Now, Dyche is having a bad season, but Allardyce for a long time never got relegated. And now he can't get a job because teams don't want to hire him because he plays ugly football, which is frankly stupid, but it's what it is. So it's just lazy analysis in my view, but it's what it is. So this is actually going longer because we're already at 40 minutes here. I really didn't think I could talk this much about me whinging about football, essentially. So essentially, now I'm going to dip it into analytics and against feel. So when we talk about analytics and efficiency models, so these things can make your team greater than the sum of its parts. For example, if we go back to the basketball analogy, Houston, before the 2016-17 season, nobody believed they were going to be a top 4 seed. People thought they'd be struggling to make the playoffs, if I remember right. And they finished third. And they finished on 55 or 57 wins. 55 wins. 55, yeah. It was something, 55, 57. No, it was 8 wins ahead of OKC. So 55 wins. They finished in the 3 seed. And they were comfortably ahead of the 4 and 5. Who had more talent. And the 4 definitely had more talent because it was the Clippers. And they had 2 clear all-stars and a third borderline all-star because of his rim protection and his rebounding and his lob threat and things like that. So they had 2.5 all-stars, let's say. And Houston only had 1. 1 actual all-star. The Spurs above them had 2. The Warriors above them had 4. They weren't supposed to finish third. But because of analytics, because of the fact that they decided to maximize the value of each possession. For example, if you shoot 70% on shots at the rim in basketball, that's 1.4 points per possession, which is a good number. Like that's super, super good. And if all you shoot is free throws, and you, as a whole, as a team, shoot 80% from the free throw line, that again is a good. And let's just say every possession. I don't know how the model works with free throws and how that accounts for points per possession, but let's say you get 2 free throws on average. Like that is around 1.8 points per possession. If you get every single foul is a 2-shot foul, and in 3 you shoot 35% from 3. Let's go, even 30% from 3. That brings you to what? 0.9 points per possession, which isn't awful, but it's not great. And if you go up to 40%, that's 1.2 points per possession, which is super, super good. Like, that is really, really impressive because on the account which you say every single shot is worth, because now you're shooting 60% on 2-point shots. So using that, they managed to outperform almost every other team. The only team which did, they had the third best record in the league that season as well, because I think they had a better record than the top seed in the East. They had the third best record in the league. When talent-wise, they were probably, I don't know, probably the 8th, maybe. I don't even know if they were top 10 talent-wise that season. I couldn't, like, they would have been top 10 just by virtue of the fact they were a top 10 player who was top 5 in performance that season. But there's an argument that there were 2, 3, maybe 4 teams in the East who had more talent than them, and there was definitely an argument there was 6, 7, 8 teams with more talent than them in the West. So maybe we're looking at 10 teams. So that's greater than the sum of its parts. And I believe that was what happened with Arsenal in 22-23. Because if we look at their team, Ramsdale's not a superstar. Ben White is just a good, solid, functional right back. Gabriel Magalhaes is a solid centre back. Zinchenko is rubbish. Then we look at, who do they have? Didn't have Rice this season. They had Partey. Good player, not a superstar. Odegaard. Very good player. He's made a leap this year. Last year. Very good player. They had Jorginho, I want to say, starting towards the end of the season. I don't rate Jorginho. Martinelli, good player. Runs in behind. He's a physical threat, and he's alive. He's live to get you 15 to 20 goals a season in all competition, maybe 25, across 60 games. Jesus, top player, very good player. Saka, top player, very, very good player. So ultimately, what do you have there? And then Saliba as well. I deliberately left him out to the end because I didn't bring him. So you have what? 3 very, very good players and 2 inarguable world-class players. And then if you look at that compared to Liverpool, Alisson, Trent, Van Dijk, Konate, none of them midfield. But what? Just in the back 4, you have 4 world-class players. Then you have Salah. So that's 5 world-class operators. And they finished 5th that season. Okay, the midfield was awful, but again, some of the parts thing, Arsenal outperformed them. And City, Edison, world-class. Walker at that point was still world-class. Diaz, Stones, very, very, very good players who were better than Arsenal's starting centre-backs with the exception of Saliba. Left back, they didn't have Guardiola. Who do they have? I can't remember who they had left back. Cannot remember for the life of me who they had left back. Rodri, world-class operator. Grealish, very good player. De Bruyne, world-class, world-level, all-world operator. Who was the other midfielder they had? Gundogan, world-class operator, one of the best around. Captain for that season, I think he was. Yeah, because they won in trouble that season. Grealish, not a superstar, but he's a good player. Haaland, best number 9 in the world. Him or Benzema that season. Haaland has the edge because he's weird threatening behind. And then off the right, who did they have? Don't remember. I cannot remember who they have off the right. Did they still have Mars at that point? I can't remember. And for them to push City, but they only lost, I think it was about 4 to 6 points. So 2 games. And even then, Arsenal just threw in the towels towards the end of the season. That is super, super impressive. And they were ahead for, I think, about 30 match games or something like that. So it shows that analytics and efficiency and maximizing with this egalitarian type system where you're based on possession and duels and physicality and not having one clear superstar. Saka's clearly ahead of the pack now, but he wasn't then, I don't think. That can lead you, as well as having an elite defense, can lead you to having an 85 point season. But that's what they were last season too, just with some slight improvements in terms of general overall players, with Rice, things like that. Whereas Liverpool, if we take last season, Arsenal pretty much had the same makeup. Liverpool were better when healthy. And they did not have the same flaw in terms of a system. Their base level wasn't as good as Arsenal's, but they outperformed them when healthy. If Liverpool don't get hurt with that streak of injuries last season, they win the league. I think quite comfortably too. I think they would crack 90 points. Because Trent missed time, Szoboszlai missed time, McAllister missed time. I think Konate missed time at one point as well. Salah missed some time due to AFCON. So, a bunch of Diaz, I want to say, missed some time as well. Or was that the season before? I don't remember. I don't remember exactly, but the point is that they had a bunch of guys miss a bunch of time who were key pieces to their team. And that cost them down the stretch when it came to the league. Because City only really picked up towards the end of the season. I don't think City were really fussed about it last season until it became clear that the other two were bottling it. So, you know what I mean. So, now it comes into what's actually more valuable when it comes to the difference in models and things like that. So, an Arsenal last season, I don't think that they've made enough stark improvements this season to still win the league with that same model, which is why I think they need a game breaker. But the problem is, does Arteta's systems allow for a game breaker to come in? I don't know, because of the fact he doesn't like individuality. And there's a reason where he's always signed younger players or guys who are in bad situations, because of the fact that he can mould them, he can brainwash them into doing his weird bloody parachutes and all that nonsense. So I thought they needed a superstar forward. I thought they needed an Osimhen, a Leao, a guy like that. A guy who can break a game on his own, because I don't think Saka's that. Saka's excellent, but I prefer a guy who can run in behind as my game breaker, or has elite ball strike. And Saka's excellent, and to start the season he started off like a house on fire. But those guys are more game breakers. Saka's better than Osimhen. When Leao's in full flow, he's better than Saka, but that's a different conversation. So I think they need a game breaker, but does Arteta's style allow that to be? I don't know. So all of a sudden it becomes a question where what's the next step here for Arsenal? Can they win the league season? And if they don't, there's going to be serious questions asked. Like with this Anthony Gordon, who isn't a game breaker himself, I don't think. So I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one. So, and the final point I want to make on this is, just from an individual standpoint, when you sap the individualism from the game, which is what a lot of these coaches have done, with this egalitarian style of football, this equal opportunity, this DEI style of football, it sort of saps it. The opportunity within the system for the individual person is fine, but it strips away what a player can be. Now, how many players justify breaking that question is the balance you must find. Not many, but when you have those guys available, do you make the concession? I believe the answer should be yes. For example, let's go back to Arsenal and Leao. Leao is the second most talented player of this crop. There's Mbappe clearly at the top, and then there's Leao. Then you have Vinny's, Haaland's, guys like that. That's not a knocking at any of those, just that Leao was 6'4", and he rides across the surface, he's got 2 good feet, he's wonderful technically. He's a freak. Get him in the right environment, he's a joke. So, I don't know, do you grant it to... Because even Vinny doesn't justify... Vinny doesn't justify you breaking your entire model for him. I don't think. Because he's not a quick adaptive... It took 3 years to link with Karim Benzema, for Christ's sake. And Benzema's one of the easiest players in the history of the world to play with for a superstar. He struggles to link with Neymar. Because... I don't know why. And Neymar, again, particularly the Neymar which came around when Vinicius became a truly relevant player in 2021-22, that Neymar's super easy to play with because he's not dribbling so much anymore. He's not occupied. He's a pure 10, and Vinicius doesn't need those 10 areas. So, I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one. But that's a whole different conversation. And I think when you speak to the average Joe, the average person who doesn't read football in a super nerdy way like some people do, even they don't view it as fun anymore. Because at the end of the day, back in the day, you had guys, let's just take 20 years ago, for example. Henry, then you have Ronaldo, then you have Zidane, then you have Ronaldinho, then you have Sami Eto'o, you have Nedved, you have Shevchenko, you have Seedorf. All these different guys who play higher up the pitch, Kaká, all these different guys who play higher up the pitch, but they all have their own different unique styles. A lot of the time now, it's you have to fit into a certain box. And if you can't fit into that box, you have to go. Because the coach isn't going to make concessions for you. So I don't know, it's a bit of an unfortunate one. And I think that those guys, even though the raw quality of the tactical and the models and things like that weren't quite as high, they gave you more value for your entertainment pound or dollar, whichever one you want to do. Like, those guys were more entertaining, even if they weren't as good as a lot of the guys today. And okay, that's a bad example because of the fact that, like, say, the only guy today who's unquestionably better than a lot of the guys is Mbappe. You can argue Haaland too. Haaland is probably better than, say, Crespo, who is a fairly unique striker. Well, not probably, he is, but I'm saying probably for. He's clearly better than Crespo, who's a unique striker, who was very fun to watch. He's clearly better than Shevchenko, guys like that. Even 10 years ago, you had more value for your entertainment currency because individualism was still somewhat encouraged. So I don't know. It's a fine line to balance, and I don't quite know if we'll ever get back to the point where individualism is really, truly encouraged. I don't know. And the thing is, I still think they can exist today. For example, if we look at Mbappe, 2022, individualism was encouraged, and he was doing everything for a PSG team, which won the league, and they were outplaying Real Madrid. They outplayed Real Madrid for 150, honestly 165, no, honestly 170 of a 180 minute time. 165 in fairness, because Madrid are like a 15-20 minute stretch. Which could have easily reached the semi-finals of the Champions League. Maybe even the final. Maybe even won it, had they managed to get by that Real Madrid team, which they really should have had mistakes by Donnarumma and Marquinhos. Mo Salah, again, he was leading Liverpool on a fantastic stretch on a team which encouraged his individualism. Benzema is a very great individual. He is someone who associates and makes the guys around him better to a high degree. Even if you want more recent examples, look at Yamal. Lamine Yamal's a superb player. He's not someone who's confined and restricted to a box. That's actually something I really like about Hansi Flick. He will encourage individuals to do what suits them and maximize the efficacy of their performances, and as a result, he maximizes the performance of the team around them. So we can still operate today. Barcelona have won 4 of 4. Or 3 of 3, right? Yeah, 4 of 4. I think. Yeah, because they've had a middle game. 4 of 4. It shouldn't take me that long to figure out. But these players, there is an exception to be made. Even Bellingham, like, you completely shift an entire thing to suit him, and he drove Real Madrid to La Liga. Like, what can you say about it? Now, the reason I ignored Messi, Neymar, and those other guys is because of the fact that they're older now, they're part of previous generations and things like that. So the question is, do coaches want to? That is what it ultimately comes down to now. I think they can. I think they easily can, but I don't think they want to, because of the fact they like to have the extra. They like to have the extra control. So I don't know. I was gonna do some questions, but this is already coming up on an hour, and this topic as a whole I didn't think would last this long, and I can easily go for longer on this. So yeah, a bit of a weird ending. And I had the 3-minute rant at the start. I talked for 15 minutes about game models analytics. Okay, so yeah, that is it for today. The questions I've asked I will cover next week because they're actually super good questions, so I'll keep these in my back pocket. And next week is going to be international break, so I'm going to talk about more historical stuff next week, namely World Cup campaigns and what I think and how I'd rank some of the ones that I've seen or ones that I've gone back and looked at. So that should be fun. So for now, if you think that, I'm a bit extreme in terms of the way I view it, or I've rambled a lot, which I have because I'm relatively tired today, then leave it in the comments, whatever you want. And yeah, I will talk next week and it'll be about World Cups. So hopefully you enjoy that. Hopefully you enjoy this and my rambling about it if you stay till the end. And I'll speak to you next time. Goodbye.